G'day one and all. I've got a little treat for you today, things that go bang, and I've got a box of things that go bang. This is my Nitro, or my dead Nitro engine collection. I'm just going to go through it for you because it's always fun to look at why things don't work and what happens when they break. And Nitro is a dying thing, not many people flying Nitro anymore, so this may be the last chance we get to look at dead Nitro engines. So put the box to one side so we can look at these things one at a time. Now this is the MDS that I had. I bought $39 I think in a sale because there was a warehouse full of these things made in Russia, really nicely made. I had to replace all the slot head screws with cap head screws, and I mean it's a nicely engineered piece of machinery. I mean the size of that conrod is nice and big, big crank pin, and you can see in the back the bore is in good condition, the piston's not scuffed or anything, so this is a really good motor. I can probably take this side of the back plate off as well. You can see the other end. So you can see right through. It was a great way to build engines, this having the separate crankshaft. I could probably pull this down. Right, there you go. You can see the size of the conrod. Now it's a meaty piece of metal. Really nice engine. It really went like stink. I have some video on this channel of this engine running and a trainer, and it just went like a missile. It really flew like a missile. So you're probably thinking, well, why, if it's all so good, why is it in the box of things that have gone bang? Well, here's the front end of it. This is obviously this piece bolts on, sorry, wrong way around. This piece bolts on, I'll put this in the back end. Here we go. This piece bolts on the front, and there is, of course, the carburetor goes in here, and the crankshaft goes through there. Now you notice the crankshaft's missing. I don't have the crankshaft. Well, I do actually. I have at least one piece of the crankshaft. Where is it? Here we go. There's the crankshaft. Well, that's part of it. I don't know if I've got the other piece in here. It may have got lost over a passage of time. I think it has. It's probably lying around somewhere, but it's not immediately apparent. So we will take a look at this piece of crankshaft, and I'll show you what was wrong with this motor in terms of its design and how it failed. Right, here is the front bearing housing, which has the carburetor mounting, and there's the crankshaft comes out the front. So the crankshaft normally runs through here. This is a 15mm internal diameter bearing, and this was a very standard size bearing back in the day. So the crankshaft itself, the part that rang through that bearing, also had a 15mm diameter, as we can see on my calipers. Whoops, if I can get it set up. As we can see there, 15mm diameter. Problem was, in order to get a lot of performance out of a high revving, high performance engine like this, they had to have a big hole down the middle of the crankshaft, because this was also, of course, the inlet timing. The exhaust gases come in through the carburetor, down through the center of the crankshaft into the crankcase. So the problem was they ended up drilling this out way too much, and if we put calipers on here, that is actually 1.65 millimeters thick, the wall thickness on this crankshaft. That's just way small. Really weakened this crankshaft enormously, and you can see obviously it broke with torsional stress, just twisted it and it snapped. It was partly my own fault because I was using a heavy plastic or nylon propeller, a bolly prop, which are quite heavy, and of course every time the engine fires and the piston comes down pushing on the crankshaft, it tries to twist the crankshaft, and the heavier the prop you have on this end, the more torque, more twisting forces applied to that crankshaft, so more likely it is to break. But there were other reasons why this broke. If we look at where the crack began, or the break began, you can see it began right here in the corner. There is a milled piece across here, and you can see where it's ground across there, and there's a very sharp corner here. See that radius? It's very tight radius. Problem is that this produces a stress riser. That should have been far wider radius, because where it broke was just here on this corner, because the stress riser gave way and then the crack just propagated right round, and bang, the crankshaft fell in half, at which point, of course, the engine became nose weight. So yeah, it did put a few hours up actually. I was quite impressed with how long it actually did run. I think I got about probably 10 or 12 hours out of this engine, and I treated it very harshly, but it broke. So that was interesting. And now you'll learn a lot from this. As I say, you want to have as big a radius as possible when you're dealing with metals, because the stress risers form on the edges, and they obviously should have just made this crankshaft a little bit bigger, made this a little bit bigger and used slightly bigger bearings. Then they could have got like a 2.5 or a 3mm wall thickness. Should have been tough as old boots, but they didn't do it. So the result was kaboom. Right, let's move on to the next thing that went bang. This is a Thunder Tiger 61 GP. These are a really nice engine. I mean, these things are actually a 65. The actual capacity is 0.65 cubic inches, so they're bigger than it says on the box, because it says 61 over here. See, 61, but it's actually a 0.65 cubic inch displacement. Now, they're a plain bearing motor. That means that there are no bearings in here supporting the crankshaft, only bushes. There's a bronze bush runs all the way through there. And one of the problems with the bronze bush is that over time, they will wear and they will start to oval. And once a bronze bush ovals, then you end up with a situation where this crankshaft can actually move up and down ever so slightly, and it begins to hammer. So instead of just spinning freely, it goes up and down, it starts to hammer, and eventually you get a crack. And that crack on this engine, as you can see, has gone right along through the crankcase. It's actually split a half on both sides. I mean, you think this was crash damage, but it's not. It's just, it came down and the motor stopped, and when it came down, that's what it looked like. The hammering, the vibration at the front, just the ovaling of this journal, and the movement it gave the crankshaft meant that it just ended up dying. I'm going to show you a close-up here of the journal itself, and you can see how it is actually pulled away from the aluminium even. Let's have a close look at that. You can see that the constant hammering here has actually pulled the aluminium casting away from the actual bronze journal itself, and you can see how out of shape everything is here, and the two big cracks that radiate from that point. So yeah, that's the thing. If you run a plain bearing engine long enough and hard enough, then it will break, sometimes like this. Now this one was run very hard because I had a tuned pipe on it, and I really wrung it out. It was really, really hammered. You can see, I can even take the head off this one. Look, run with castor oil, so I had plenty of lube, but eventually, yeah, the metal just gave way. There just wasn't enough strength once that wears. I mean, this one probably had over 150 hours on it, so you expect plain bearing motors do not last forever. Pipe fell off. Pipe fell off, man. That was the end of the Thunder Tiger GP 61. Lovely motor. And now a piece of Chinese metal. This is an SK90, a 90 size motor. As you can see, I've got the piston out, and as you can see, it's like pretty standard sort of, you know, this is how these things go. It's a 90 size motor. They're all very, very similar. It's a cast crankcase in one piece. This one's got dual ball bearings, and it's got an ABC liner. Here's the piston. It has one ring. See the one ring at the top here. It was a good motor. They run really nicely. They're not a revvy motor. They're really torquey. They're ported to give very, very high torque across the low end of the power band, and so they tail off pretty quickly with RPMs. But you'll notice there's one thing missing. Let's get a close-up on this. See if you can spot what's missing out of this engine. Here's a look deep inside the bowels. I'll give you a look from the top so you can also see, hopefully the focus, might not focus down there. There we go, look at this. There is no crank pin on that crankshaft. That crankshaft has no crank pin because it broke. The crank pin actually broke off, and the crank pin, of course, is the thing that connects the connecting rod to the crankshaft. So when the crank pin broke, it stopped running. Engine stopped, plane came down. And again, there's a lot to be learned from this. Looking closely at that, I can't really show you here, and I haven't got the crankshaft out. It's a bit of a mission to get that out. But what happened here was, instead of radiusing the join between the crankshaft and the crank pin so that the crank pin was sort of a nice smooth curve, this may even be a pressed-in crank pin, I'm not sure, but there's a really sharp edge on the edge here. And what's happened is that really sharp edge produced a stress riser. Over time, a crack developed, and the crack propagated all the way through, and it just snapped right off. Snapped right off. bad design. And these engines, the SK90, were renowned for breaking crank pins. But as long as they run really well. What a shame. And you notice that when it actually came off, it actually put a crack in the bottom of the crankcase. The conrod just kept on going and whacked into the bottom of the crankcase. It's probably a ding on the conrod. Actually, the conrod looks pretty good. It didn't actually make much of a ding on the conrod itself, but it sure as hell punched a hole in the crankcase. So that's why it stopped. No crankcase compression, or also no connection between the crankshaft and the piston. That'll also slow you down a lot. So yeah, another dead engine from the box of things that go bang. Now this isn't my entire collection of engines that have gone bang, of course, but I will try and hunt out some of the others if people find this video interesting, because we do this little post-mortem afterwards. We can find out what the designers did wrong. And yeah, I've got some other ones which have swallowed screws and all sorts of crazy things have happened to them. But I thought I would just show you this. Now I've got another one of these MDS motors, these MDS FIRE61s, front intake, rear exhaust 61s, and it's brand new in the box. I have to strip it down, strip all the congealed grease out of it, replace the cap heads, replace the flathead screws with cap heads, and set it up. So I'm going to be running another one of these very shortly. Just got to find an airframe to put it in. One of our other club members, Tim, has also bought one, so we could have some really head-to-head competition running these motors. We'll be running it on a wooden prop, a lightweight wooden prop, probably about a 10 by 9 or a 10 by 8, because they love to rev. They don't like to be loaded at low revs with a heavy prop. So that's what we'll be doing. So yeah, if there's anything else you want to know about Nitro engines, if you remember what they are, then please feel free to ask. I've been using these things for nigh on 50 years and I still love Nitro. It's great fun. It's wonderful. It's just so much less clinical than electric. So there you go. That's a little video for today. Hope you liked it. If you've got ideas for videos, then please let me know, because it's coming up to the winter period here. You know, already the weather's turned to crap. And if I can provide little snippets of interest like this when it's raining or blowing, let me know. I'll be happy to do so. Bye.